Alexandra Sabalier. I'm an immigration and tax attorney. I work virtually with my clients from all over the world. And here I am today with attorney Gilberto Oliveras, who specializes in sports law,
Yes.
intellectual property. He does all kinds of stuff, and he's going to explain to us what services he provides to his clients. He just opened his practice this year, and so he's trying to get as much information out as possible to all the future clients or prospect clients or people who may need his help. So it would be very interesting to know and learn how he can help you. Let's introduce attorney Gilberto Oliveras.
Hi, my name is Gilberto Oliveras. I founded Oliveras Legal this year, and it's mostly focused on sports law, intellectual property, entertainment law, sports management, anything to do with sports and entertainment. We deal with it because I did a master's in sports law last year in Madrid. And I also worked in Ecuador for 5 months doing sports law. So we focus on athletes from either a very young age starting out to the end of their careers when they're finishing their careers, and we work with everything from advising them to actually representing them in court or in front of teams and arbitration if we have to go.
Okay, so you negotiate their contracts with the teams or prospect teams that they may sign contracts with, all that stuff, correct?
Yeah, we will work with everything from drafting the contract and advising them to, when the contract is broken for some reason and we have to advise them on how to proceed. I'm a FIBA licensed agent, so I also work with athletes to finding them new opportunities, whether it's in Puerto Rico or abroad in Europe or Ecuador or South America or even the United States. We just work with athletes trying to find them new opportunities as well. So we work with athletes in every aspect of their professional careers.
Amazing. And you work with athletes in all kinds of sports, or do you have any sports in which you specialize more on? How does that work?
I used to, when I was in Ecuador, I mainly focused on martial arts and soccer or football. And now I'm here in Puerto Rico. I mostly work with basketball and baseball, but I do work with all kinds of athletes. It's just what I've had the opportunity to work with. So my expertise has been with football, baseball, martial arts, and basketball. But I am open to working with every single athlete.
Okay, great. And the athletes that you work with, are they mostly trying to stay in the same country, or are they looking forward to move to other countries and other teams? How can you help them if they want to transition from one country to another, from one team to another? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's very interesting because most athletes do want to stay in one place, but the opportunities sometimes just emerge abroad easier. So for example, here right now we don't have any sports due to the situation. So most athletes are trying to find a way to move abroad and play abroad. So in that sense, we have to try to either find opportunities or find a connection with some teams that want to talk to them or agents maybe that want to deal with them and link them up to some teams and opportunities that they're able to play. In that sense, we need to know a little bit about immigration law so we can tell them what they're exposed to, what kind of visas or what kind of permits they need to be able to play abroad. And that's actually where you come in, because as a sports lawyer, I do have a little experience and I do have a little knowledge on what kind of visas I need, but I'm not in depth dealing with that on a day-to-day basis. And that's why we have to build a network around different types of attorneys. And in my case, you would be the attorney I would go to if I needed to find out about visas, because I know there's at least 3 or 4 different kinds of visas that you need to check out when you're a professional athlete. So I don't know if you want to tell people what you do and how you do it.
Sure, we're more than pleased. Okay, so this is where I would come in for athletes who are looking forward to move. How you said, many athletes do want to stay in the teams that they're at or the countries that they're at, probably because that's where they have already their agents, their teammates, their coaches, their family members, and all of that. So I think that kind of makes them stay in their same surroundings that they're practicing and they're growing on. But if athletes do want to move abroad or to a foreign team, there are many processes that they have to go through depending on what stage they are at in their professional level. I will talk about briefly of different stages or visas that they can apply for depending on what the purpose of their moving or transitioning is. Okay,
One
yes,
question, and I want to interrupt you. One question I get a lot from athletes that, or coaches or support personnel that wants to come over and play here or wants to go abroad, is if they can do that on waiver programs or visa waiver programs and just avoid the whole visa thing, because visas tend to be expensive.
of
It tends to
course,
be a long process, and there's not a sure thing that you will get it.
the
So
time, yes.
yeah, what I tell them is that there's no right way to answer this, but mostly you cannot play professionally on a visa waiver, at least in the States. I don't know
Correct.
abroad, and that's where you would come in. That's where you would tell them what they can and cannot do on a visa waiver and what type of visa they would need. So I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit more.
Of course, yes, I will share a little bit of the knowledge that I have on this. If an athlete wants to go to the United States and they do not want to go through the process of applying for the visa that they might need for the purposes that they're traveling, some of them can go through the visa waiver program, which means that they don't need a visa to go to the United States. But this will depend on two things. One is the purpose of their trip to the United States. If they are planning to go to the US for a tournament or some type of training, it may be possible for them to go to the US without a visa because they will not get paid for this activity. Correct? So if they go to the United States and they don't have a visa, they cannot get paid for the services or the practices that they do there. So that is one thing that they have to take into consideration, because if they are trying to negotiate a contract or meeting with a team, then they will probably need a visa to go to the US. The second thing that they have to keep in mind is that it depends on what country they're coming from, because not all countries have the same treaty with the United States. And in most of the times, countries, the United States do require travelers from certain countries to have visas to enter the US. So if you were coming from Japan or from any country in the Western European continent, then you most likely don't need a visa, because the US has this treaty with those countries and the visa waiver program is available for you. But if you're coming from another country that does require a visa, then it does not matter the purpose of your trip. You do have to acquire a visa before going to the US. So
Is
those are
there
the first two things. Yes.
is there a consequence to not following the rules on a visa waiver program or not getting the right visa? Like
Yes, of
what can
course.
happen?
Okay, so the first thing that can happen is that they don't let you in the country. So of course that would be a huge setback if you have a time frame for your activities in the US, especially if you have a competition or you have a meeting with a team or some prospect opportunity. They may not let you in the US if you go to the United States without a visa. And the other problem that you can have is that if you do get into the United States, but you do some activities that you're not supposed to do, like get paid for your services, for your practices, for your training, or for a competition, anything that you're going to do in the US, then you might not be able to get in the US again. So it's not worth it if you want to go to the United States and you have your purposes and your goals already set in mind, and you're going with a certain objective. It's better if you get a visa for that specific objective, of course. I mean, there's no way around it, and it's better if you do it with time. You organize yourself, and that way you can wait for the visa and for all the processes patiently, because it does take time and it's a whole process. But it's
Okay.
worth it. It's the legal way
And
to do it.
yeah, and so mostly I work with professional athletes, and we usually talk about getting the O1 visa or the P1 visa. Those are
Okay,
I think you'll explain them better. But those are the visas when you're a professional athlete and you're about to get paid for your ability to play.
correct.
But you told me when we were talking about earlier, you told me there's another visa you might be able to get if you're an amateur athlete, if you're not getting paid for your
Yes,
services.
there are many visas. I mean, for amateur athletes, there are different visas as well. It depends on what activities are you going to do in the US. Um, if you're an amateur athlete, you can either get the B1 or B2 visa. These two visas, both of them are kind of similar in the procedure, but they're different in the sense that they provide you for different opportunities to do once you're in the United States. The B1 and B2 visas are visitor visas, so they have a time limit. You cannot stay in the US for more than 6 months with these visas. and the requirements for them are going to depend on what activity are you going to do, whether you're in school or whether you're going as a sole athlete for your own purposes, or whether you're going to practice or be part of a team in high school. It will depend, and then the requirements to apply for these visas will depend, because if you, for example, if you're in school, they will require you to show proof that you're enrolled in that school and that that school is asking for you to become an athlete in the school, etc. So those two visas are available. Also, the F1 and the P1 visa are available for amateur athletes. The F1 visa requires the athlete to be in a private school, to be enrolled in a private school, because this visa is intended for athletes who would try to stay in the United States for a longer period. And so if you're in a public school, the longest that you can stay in the United States on this visa would be 12 months. And so that kind of makes no sense, because it would only be 1 year that you would get the opportunity to practice or become part of that team. And it's much better if you are enrolled in a private school, and that way you can stay longer in the United States, so the purpose of the visa is completed, right? Because you're trying to stay for a long training and competition period of time. And yes, those are basically the visas for amateur students. The P1 visa, you have to show that you are recognized or internationally recognized athlete. So that one is a little bit more complicated, because you actually have to show proof of your recognition internationally. Your country has to send letters to the United States stating that you are a recognized athlete in that country, and that you're coming with intentions of staying longer because you already have certain type of status in the international platform.
And this is usually, in my experience, usually you achieve this by proving that the governing body ranks you according to your skill. And it's a very complicated process. Usually involves packets this big of filing. It's really it's a really complicated process. So I know that for these type of visas, not everyone can do them. This is someone that actually has to specialize in doing this.
Correct. And maybe for you as an agent or representative of an athlete, would be easier to go hand in hand with the athlete, because this one requires that you find an association or an organization in the United States, or let's say in Puerto Rico, the country where the athlete is trying to stay at. So that organization also recognizes this international recognition or status that the athlete has. So it goes hand in hand, the country where the athlete is coming from, and also the country where the athlete is going to. So maybe that's where you would come at too, by being the intermediary between the registration process and the representation process of, look, this is a recognized athlete, and this person is qualified to apply for this visa and should be recognized in Puerto Rico or in the United States.
Yeah.
So that for you also, it proves to be more complicated than other visas, because you have to prove the certain status that the athlete already has.
Yeah, and filing for a visa and filing those big packets I just told you about does not guarantee that you will get it. And I've heard cases that people with prominent lawyers and really good lawyers have not gotten the visa just because the authorities decided that they were not extraordinary ability or extraordinarily enough. Yeah. So it's very important to know that even though you might have the best immigration lawyer or the best sports lawyer, you will probably this is not guaranteed that you will get into the United States.
Exactly.
So it's very important.
Yeah. It is important that you take that into consideration, because the visa, and especially if you're an amateur, because if you're an amateur, it's difficult to prove that you have this international recognition and that your skill is already so improved to the level that you are okay or are compliant with the requirements of this visa. If you're an amateur, by its means, you're not yet a professional. Yeah. And so it's more complicated even to prove your skills and your recognitions internationally.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, I mean, because the option is there. So that means that there's people and there's athletes who have acquired it and who are in the United States or in Puerto Rico under this visa. And so if you're a skilled athlete and you're recognized in your country and in the international level, then by all means, it's an option.
Actually, it's been interesting because during the coronavirus, they have blocked most of the visas in the United States, but the one that has been available mostly is the athlete visa. Athletes they should not probably, but they can travel in and out of the United States with the correct visa. So it's actually one of the few things that it's different than the other
Yes.
visas. You can actually right now, you can actually, if you have extraordinary ability or prove that you're
Exactly.
an athlete of certain status, you can actually come to the United States and participate in the activities.
That's true. Yes, it's one of the exceptions that has
Yeah.
allowed people to go in and out of the United States because you're a professional in that field.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
There's one more visa I think we haven't talked
Yeah.
about that, yeah, I think it's also, we use it a lot. It's the O1 visa. I don't know if you know a little bit about this, if you can tell us a little bit about how it
Yes.
works.
The O1 visa is for aliens or for non-residents of the United States who have an extraordinary ability. So this is kind of similar to the P1 in the sense that you have to prove that you're specialized in one sport in specific and that you're so good at this sport that your abilities surpass, let's say, the abilities of or the skills of athletes that are already in the United States with their visas or their permission or that are citizens of the United States. And so this will require you to be more skillful, maybe. Let's say not skillful because athletes are skillful in all broad senses, but let's say that you have to show that you're extraordinary at this sport and that
Yeah.
because of your specialty, then you are allowed to be in the United States and this
Yeah.
visa will be granted to you because of these
In my
skills.
experience, we use this one for specific events. So if you have like a boxing match and you need elite boxers, you have to prove that there's not, boxers are not at the level of the boxers you're bringing in at the
Yeah.
United States, for example, and then you bring in Russian boxers or bring in
Correct.
boxers from Eastern Europe to fight in the United States. So that's where I've seen it mostly used. I know this visa is used also for researchers and for entertainers, for other people.
Yes.
But in sports, it's mostly used for that, for like specific events. You have an event, you want to bring in international people that are well renowned and are very skillful, and the United States does not have athletes of that stature at that sport or at that level, then you bring them in. That's the way we've used it.
Yeah, it can work for that as well, because the good thing about this visa is that it gives you a time frame of up to 3 years. And so if the athlete has to go to the United States, like for say a competition in specific, and that athlete acquires this visa, that at least will have the visa for up to 3 years. So every event that happens within that time frame, then the athlete will already be allowed to enter the United States under this visa. And so it's very good if you have an athlete that is competing or that has back-to-back trainings or competitions in this country and then back to the United States, and then he has to go back or she has to go back to their country of origin and go back to the United States, and the O1 is supposed to be a very good option for this type of movement in and out of the United States. And also, if obviously the athlete already specializes in, let's say, boxing, like you said, then it's most likely that the athlete will have more than one competition in 1 year in the United States. So bringing the athlete under the O1 visa will allow the athlete to compete in different competitions throughout the year with the same visa without having to go through the whole process of applying for a new visa every time they come in. So
there's, I think we cover the United States visas pretty well. I think people, but there's one problem we've seen recently is that people don't know that when they travel abroad, they need a visa. People from the United States. People from the United States usually think that just because you have a U.S. passport, you're allowed anywhere. And you might be allowed for tourist reasons some places, but you will need a visa if you go, for example, to Europe, where you're actually based right now.
Yes.
And recently with the coronavirus, we've seen a bunch of athletes leaving Puerto Rico to go play abroad. We've seen a bunch go to Mexico. We've seen a bunch go to Europe, because Europe and Mexico have leagues that start playing. Puerto Rico has not started playing. It probably will not play. So we've seen a lot of athletes go abroad, and there's an issue of what visa do you have to get if you want to play, for example, in Europe, or do you need a visa if you want to go play in Europe and get paid? So I think that's a little bit, you can teach a little bit about that since you are actually based in Europe.
Yeah. I think that one of the main reasons why athletes try to move to Europe or abroad from the United States, it's because they want to expand their recognition and they want to maybe try other methods of training and learning different competitors. But at least in Europe, it will depend on the country that the athlete wants to move or to work at. But if they want to visit the country with purposes and intents of practicing or training or just networking, then maybe a visa will not be required, especially if the athlete is coming from the United States, because as I said in the beginning, there are many treaties that the United States has with different countries that allow US citizens or US residents to visit other countries and not have to apply for a visa. However, if the athlete does want to visit another country with purposes of negotiating a contract or becoming part of a team in that country or establishing themselves in another country, then in that sense, then yes, they will need a visa for sure. Because of the same reasons, they will be getting paid in that country, they will have a contract, and they will be in that country for what is known as a business purpose. Even though if it's an athlete and they think it's just sports and that they're doing something that is a talent, it is work at the end of the day. And so they will need a visa. For Europe, for example, it will all depend on what country the athlete is trying to go to. But if the athlete is trying to go to Europe for working purposes, then they will need a visa that is under the C section of the Schengen area. And these visas are what is known as sports competition visa. And so the processes for this visa will depend on what sport the athletes play, what state of their career they're at, if they're amateurs, if they're professionals, if they're transitioning, or if they're in a national team. It will depend on what requirements they'll have to apply for these visas. But in the general spectrum, they will need a visa that is called the sports competition visa, and it's under the section C of the Schengen area. As I said, if we go more into specific, they all depend country by country, sport by sport. So if you want to go to France, it will be much different, the process, than if you want to go to Germany or to Spain or to Italy. I recommend 100% that if an athlete is trying to move to a country abroad from the United States to work as an athlete or to join another team in that country, that they contact you as an agent first, because that way you're really able to negotiate for them in a country abroad, which will make the process a lot more easier. And second, to contract or to at least contact and get information from an immigration attorney who can help them with this process to apply for the visa that this specific athlete needs.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we have to touch upon one more subject before we leave, because there's something about immigration that people also forget, and a lot of athletes do not know. When you tell them, they react like it's not possible. And it's the fact about when you go to another country to play, you do have to pay taxes. You have to pay taxes over there. And if you're an American athlete, you have to pay taxes in the US for reasons which you can tell us more about. But the thing is that moving to a different country does not necessarily mean that you, first of all, it doesn't mean that you don't have to pay taxes there, because you actually live there for a period. So you do have to pay taxes. And just moving to a different country does not mean that you stop paying taxes on your previous country, like the United States.
Correct.
And when you tell athletes this, they don't know this. They've never heard of this, and they react shocked and scared, because that's a lot of money to pay. So I think it's important for you to tell them like why. And you're an expert in tax law too, so I think it's very important that you tell them what they have to do when you move around.
Of course, yes. One of the reasons why I specialize in tax law as well, it's because at first I was only specializing in immigration law, but then I realized that once my clients got into the country that they wanted as American citizens, they had this other process on top of them, which was the filing of taxes in the United States. And so I said, wait a minute, I'm helping my clients, but only halfway through, because once I give them their visas, their green cards, or whatever it is that they need to get in the country that they want, whether it's the US or abroad in a foreign country other than the US, they need to file their taxes now. And so they need to be aware that this is a process and that the law requires them to go through. And so with athletes, it's the same exact process. It does not matter that the person is an athlete, a professional, or an amateur. If the person is, the athlete is an American citizen, a US citizen, it doesn't matter what country that person is settling themselves in or working at, what team they're in, they have to file US taxes. The paying of the taxes will depend on how much taxes the athlete is paying in their country of residence. So for example, let's say that the athlete is in Germany. If the athlete is in Germany, then the taxes that they pay in Germany are much more higher than the taxes that that athlete would have to pay in the United States. And so there are different options for that athlete so that he doesn't or she doesn't have to pay taxes in Germany and in the United States. and that athlete only has to pay taxes in Germany, because it's another process, but it would credit the athlete for the taxes that he or she is already paying in Germany, and it will discredit the money or the amount of money that that athlete would owe to the IRS in the US. That way, the balance in the US for taxes will be down to zero, but the filing of taxes has to happen every year to comply with the law. And if it's the other way around, if it's an athlete that is from a foreign country and trying to move to the United States, then the processing of taxes works in the sense that that athlete will have to pay taxes in the US because it's their country of residence. For athletes, there are different processes and benefits that they can apply for or try to get depending on what level of professionalism they're in, how much is the value of their contract and their contribution to the team or to their sport. But in general, the taxes that they have to pay is based on a 30% of their contractual value. So it is important for them to take this into consideration as well, and for you as their representative when you're negotiating the contract and the money that this athlete will be paid, because if they establish themselves in the United States or in Puerto Rico, they will have to file taxes and pay a high percentage of taxes on this value on their contract.
Yeah, I agree.
It's another aspect, and it's very important that they take this before.
Yeah, I think it's very important. And the fact that you can actually pay taxes in more than one country at the same time, especially if, for example, a lot of players in Puerto Rico, they have to travel to different countries. Some of them travel to Mexico for 2 months and then go to Germany for 3 months and then come back here for 3 more months. That means they have to pay tax in each country. And it's a very complicated.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but it might mean.
It depends. It might. It depends on how much time they spend in these countries. Because obviously they're moving around a lot, but they spend, let's say, more than 180 days in Mexico. They might be able, but they might be required to file taxes in more than one country. So
so it all depends on, and you need an expert on this to be able to
guide
tell
you and inform. For sure.
So this is very important, and I think. Is there a way, and I think you talked about this on your social media a couple of days ago, is there a way to not have to pay tax in the United States if you move abroad?
So the only way to not pay taxes as a US citizen, if you're not in the United States, is by renouncing to your citizenship. So it is a very hard and tough decision, but some people do take it because they understand that the burden of paying or filing taxes to the US is higher than what they're getting out of their citizenship as a US citizen. And so it is the only method that the United States provide for people to get off the responsibility and the burden of filing their taxes in the United States, but it is not free either. So that is also a consideration that you have to take. The price for renouncing to your US citizenship is $2,350. And the whole process is, again, complex, it's lengthy, it requires paperwork, and it requires sometimes interviews. And so you have to be ready that if you take this decision, to know that this is not something that will happen from one day to the other. Also, if you already owe taxes and you're trying to do this process of renouncing to your US citizenship because you want to get off that responsibility of owing taxes, you have to know that this is not like that. If you owe taxes, you will be required to pay for these taxes before you're able to renounce. So, as I said, it's a complex process. At Sabalier Law, I'm more than able to help you with the process, or your athletes, your clients, any person that might think that this is a good option for them. I can guide them through the process. I can help them decide whether this will be beneficial or if it will provide more of negative consequences for them. But in general, it is important that you know that it's not free, that it does not get off your responsibility to pay the taxes that you already owe, and that it's a lengthy process, so that it should be taken with a lot of time and in advance before you are actually getting the results that you want.
I think this has been great. I think a lot of people will take a lot from this, and a lot of athletes, entertainers, people that travel a lot will get a lot from this video. And here at Oliveras Liga, and I know at Sabalier Law, we're more than willing to help, and we're happy to help with anything you need. So feel free to contact us. I don't know if Alexandra has anything to say, but I want to thank you for everything. So thank you,
Gilberto. And yes, let's say our contact information so that people who are watching us can contact us if they need any more information or help. I know that you're available online, and
Yes.
that your practice has all kinds of accounts in all platforms in which you share very, very good and valuable information on a daily basis. You also have a podcast. Talk to us a little bit about that so that people can reach in and get to know more about your practice and your services.
Yeah, and I think a lot like Alexandra, our purpose when we launched the law firm was to educate a lot on what we do,
Correct.
and because we noticed there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yes.
So we started out by just doing the website, the social media, just to engage with people, and we noticed that maybe we should start a podcast. We have the time right now since the coronavirus thing gave us a little bit of time. So we have a little bit of time. We study a little bit every week just to put out some content so people can just listen to it on the car or working out or anything they do, so they can learn about sports law. And I know this is going to help people understand what sports law is, but I also know that people are going to take away from this a lot. And I know you do the same thing. I know you do you put out a lot of content. I think you put out more content than me. So I know you're very engaged with your followers, and I know it's the same purpose. You really want to just educate people to do things the right way, whether you're working with them or not. You just want people to do the right thing. So I think it's a good thing.
Yes. Well, thank you. Yeah. What is the name of your podcast again, so that people can find you? Yeah. It's on Spotify, correct?
Yeah, it's Lex Deportiva Podcast. You can find it on Spotify. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on every single podcast platform. I even have it on my YouTube channel, Oliveras Legal. All the social media, Oliveras Legal. You can find me there. You see my last name on the screen, so just add legal at the end, and you just find me. And then same thing for the website, oliveraslegal.com. I'm more than happy to help.
Great. I think that your services are general, they're broad, so you're able to take on any client and help them through the process that they need, if they're into the sports world, or they're an athlete or a coach or someone who's trying to get to know their rights in the entertainment industry. And so I thank you very much for all the information that you share and all the services that you provide, and that you're out there trying to help people to reach into this information that
thank you
I don't think that many people have access to, because there's not so many committed attorneys who talk about this in the public scene. And so the same thing happens with Sabalier Law. Again, I try to engage a lot with my clients, with my followers. Again, even if you're not a client of mine, I try to help and share information so that you already know what processes you can do, or what different methods there are if you want to travel, if you want to study abroad, if you want to work or move or establish a business in any other country than the US. And also I do help people and businesses to get established and settled in the United States. And now with you, I think it will be great if we can collaborate and do different businesses, so that we can share knowledge and experiences with your athletes, so that they also know what processes they have to go through once they establish themselves in a different country, even if it's the United States or any other country abroad. And so I'm available full-time at www.sabalierlaw.com. I also have social media platforms at Sabalier Law. I am in Facebook, I am in Instagram, I'm in LinkedIn, Twitter. You can find me anywhere. And I am here to help you, inform you, educate you. And most of all, I am here to engage and to be happy with your company in all my platforms. So I'm more than happy to share all the information and knowledge I have on immigration and tax law.
I think it's been great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I hope everyone enjoys this, and let us know.
Okay. It was great talking to you, Gilberto. Take care.
It was great talking to you. You too.
Cheers. Bye.